This video was published by mbkpinternational.com. In this video we're going to talk about our Guillotine EC19 Pro version 2 paper cutter and adjusting the cut length. Basically, if you're cut a piece of paper at 8 inches and it's 8 inches and a 1/16 of an inch, or 7 inches and 15/16 or something. If it's cutting a little long or a little short, you can adjust the cut length on that. So I'm going to turn this cutter on here. First thing I do is basically send it back to the back somewhere. When I do this, I just like 16 inches. It works good for me. Send it to 16 inches. You get you a short stack of paper, maybe 20, 30 pages. Maybe about 30. And you never want to do this with one piece of paper because it's just very hard to do. You won't get accurate cuts. This cutter is designed for stacks of paper, not one sheets of paper. So you get you a short stack of paper. And let's see here. We will remove this back shield here. So I've already taken the 4 screws out. Make this quicker. And I got this back to the 16 sparks. We already did the first video, which is adjusting the angle here. I got the angle just right. If you haven't adjusted your angle yet, you may want to check the angle on your paper to make sure it's right before you adjust the length, because you do want to get your angle perfect before you do the length. Okay, I'm going to get this paper here. I'm just going to make sure it's in here perfectly. And you can see how I position my hands. I keep my fingers under this so I can use this finger to kind of tap it against. You always want to do this in the center. It's not a good idea to do it on the tap the fingers here to make sure this is fully against it. And then just light drag on both sides, equal pressure to make sure it's fully against it. Some people like doing it over here against the side and back paper sport, but you got 2 things to continue with here. It's better just to do it in the center. If this is straight, you'll have nice cuts. It's just good to always do it in the center. It's perfectly against that. I do the paper long way so you can get a better read on it, but I did a couple cuts on this, and typically you start off with 8.5 inches, I believe, long ways, but I've already done a couple small cuts, so let's see where it's at right now. I'll go to 8 inches. And it looks like that's the last cut I did because the line is the laser line is right on the edge of it there. So I like doing a 1/4 inch at a time. We'll go 7.25. Enter. I'm sorry, I messed that up. So 7 3/4. Sorry about that. I'll just use this paper jogger to push it back. It's better to just make sure it's fully and completely against that. I'm going to do a cut here now. I just like to cut off 1/4 inch at a time. That way you don't waste a lot of paper. Because a lot of times you'll be doing multiple cuts here. Take out the top page only. You can mark this left and right side with a marker if you want, so you don't get it turned around, because you need to know. Or on this, actually the length you don't really need to know. That's just the angle adjustment, so it's not as big of a deal. Let's take this paper and put it in the back here. And just like the angle adjustment, use a metal ruler. And you can do both sides if you want, just to make sure, but I like to line up on the 2 inch line. It's kind of hard if you start at the beginning of the ruler. Just make sure it's perfectly on the 2 inch. Make sure your angle's good, so that can mess it up a little bit. So I'll check right on the 2 inch line. Then it's obviously you're gonna have to add 2 inches of this, since I'm measuring starting from the 2 inch line. Just make sure that 2 inches line is perfectly on the edge of that paper. And over here, you take a peek over here, and it's cutting exactly 1/32 of an inch long. That's what it's cutting long, 1/32 of an inch. I'm gonna put this paper back on top here. And you can adjust this in the software. If you just ask your smartphone, convert 1/32 of an inch to millimeters, because you need to do this in millimeters because it's smaller increments and it does a better job. So right now I'm going to set this to, remember I'm cutting a 1/32 of an inch long. You can hit your set button a couple times until you get to the inch mark and go to millimeter. With the down or up button, push enter. So now it's in millimeters. Now I'm going to send this all the way to the back. Get all the way to the back, push it a couple inches, make sure it won't go back any further. And basically here you push the 5 and the inner at the same time. I usually do the 5 just a fraction before it. And it will pop up the same, it should pop up the same number right there. If you didn't, hit your double C and try it again. It's basically 5 and inner at the same time, or just a hair before you can do the 5, just a fraction before the 5, but you got to hold them both. So until that pops up, and you can see it's the same number. And basically you're going to be changing that number to change your cut length. And again, we were cutting a 32nd of an inch long. If you do a search on Google, if you just ask your smartphone, convert 1/32 of an inch to millimeters, it's going to be like 0.79 something millimeters. So basically 0.8 millimeters, not even 1 millimeter. So this is 483.9 millimeters. So you clear this out, and if it was cutting a 32nd of an inch long, it's also cutting 0.8 of a millimeter too long. So I'm gonna, whatever it's cutting too long, you make it longer. If it's cutting too short, you make it shorter. So 0.8 millimeters is what we're looking for. So I'm gonna add 0.8 millimeters to that. So instead of 483.9, I'm gonna be 483.7. So we'll double C to clear it out. Make sure it's cleared out. And you got 484 actually. I don't know why it said 483.7. So that adds 0.8 millimeters to that number, which is what this was cutting long. So you make it bigger. If it was cutting short, I would have went the opposite. I would have made it shorter, 0.8 millimeters. And enter. It says okay. It beeps and says okay. And now what I like to do is I like to turn the cutter off, because it needs to recalibrate itself. After you do that, put the switch there, turn it back on. And this, why it's still in millimeters. Now I'm going to change it back to inches. Enter. You can move it forward, just make sure it does a good calibration on this one. Just a couple inches. And then turn it off and let it do a good calibration on the paper push, where it goes all the way back and comes forward. So I just like to calibrate it both in millimeters after you set it, and then calibrate it again after you change it over to inches. And I'll put it to 16 inches. That's where I like to start all these cuts at. I'm going to come back here again with the paper. You don't want to be flipping it around. You got to kind of keep it the same way. Again, just make sure it's perfectly against that. The stack is perfect there. Like right in the center on those 2 notches. Tap on it a little bit here. Pull your fingers out and let it drop down. And maybe light, very light pressure. Just make sure this top page especially is perfectly against this paper push. If it's not, you're going to be here all day going back and forth. It's very important that paper is against that paper push perfectly to get, so you know if your cuts are perfect or not. And also you always got to make sure after you do the setting in the software, you do have to turn off the cutter and let it recalibrate itself. And I like to do it right after you do it in millimeters and again in inches. So we did 7 3/4 or 7.75 last time. We'll go to 7.5. Cut off another 1/4 inch. Just take the top sheet only. Back here, you can take this to a table somewhere and measure it if it's easier for you, if you don't get the room to do this like I'm doing. Again, go to your 2-inch line and line this up perfectly, and make sure it's not at an angle. Make sure it's equal on both sides, so it's not at an angle. Okay, that's perfectly on the 2-inch line now. Now come here, and that's perfectly on the 9.5-inch line, which would be 7.5 inches because I'm going 2 inches up on this. I'm adding 2 inches to it because I'm on the 2-inch line. So that's cutting perfect. And just to be sure, my cut angle is still on. I'm going to check it on this side. And it's perfect as well. It's at 9.5 inches. And since I'm starting at the 2-inch line, that would be 7.5 inches. It's cutting perfect. I got it the first time. It's pretty simple. If it was off a little bit, again, like a fraction of hair, like the width of one of those lines on the ruler, you know, I'd be doing like 0.1 or 0.2 millimeters next time, either long or short. But Okay, that was pretty much it. We had a little break there in the video, sorry about that. But if you need to do more, you just keep that process up, and you keep doing it until you finally get it. Sometimes it will take a small adjustment. Like that was a 32nd of an inch, and so I had to convert it to millimeters at 0.8 of a 1 millimeter. A lot of times you're off just like the hair of a line, you know, one line of this ruler, just a hair. And in that case, you're going to be doing like 0.1 millimeter or 0.2 millimeters, very small amount. But you just keep repeating the process until you get it. But that's pretty much it. This video is published by mbkpinternational.com.